The house was not supposed to be there. At least not like that. Bent, breathing and humming like it hated being watched. It stood where the forest had long ago been cleared, on land marked as sterile and dead in municipal archives, nothing more than brittle soil and dry rock. Yet here it was, crouched on the edge of a meadow like a wounded beast nursing secrets too ancient to die. Its silhouette twisted at the edges. 3 stories tall on the left, 5 on the right, impossible to verify from any one vantage point. The structure seemed to tilt away when observed too long, like it recoiled from attention. The windows, tall and narrow, glittered with a greasy sheen, and behind each pane nothing but darkness. No curtains, no furniture, no hint of life, just a slow, undulating blackness. Dr. Jules Mercer stepped out of the government vehicle and adjusted her coat collar against the wind. The cold didn't bother her, it was the silence that did. Not the silence of isolation, but the pressure of it, as if the world were holding its breath in anticipation of her mistake. Arrival. Jules Mercer had not believed in haunted houses since she was 9 years old. She believed in data, in physics, in the known. An ex-physicist turned investigator for the Bureau of Structural Anomalies, she had been assigned to investigate the reappearance of a structure not seen since 1972. Old satellite maps showed a clearing here. Later drone footage captured only static and geometric blur. Then, 3 weeks ago, hikers stumbled across the house. All 3 were institutionalized after babbling about rooms that breathe backwards and a stairwell that screamed. The case fell to Mercer. "This is a waste of my expertise," she had told Director Tamlin over a secure line. Tamlin only nodded, "Which is exactly why you're the one going." Now, she stood before the so-called veiled property, a name drawn from an ancient deed filed under a company that had never existed. The house was real. Her sensors confirmed mass and volume, but her eyes refused to agree. She approached slowly, each step crunching the frosted earth beneath her boots. Her breath steamed before her, vanishing too quickly like the air was greedy. The field around the structure bore no footprints, no wind trails, no birds, not even the insects sang. The front door was 6 inches taller than standard. It had no handle, only a circular bronze depression that seemed to throb gently like a heartbeat. Jules reached into her coat and pulled out her field scanner. Reading: unknown metal, heat signature, ambient, composition, 17% unidentified. She frowned. Unidentified was just a polite placeholder. It meant beyond the scope of human science. She pressed her palm to the circle. The door opened inward with a deep, wet click. First impressions. The interior swallowed sound. The threshold felt like stepping through static. Her skin prickled, her stomach dropped half an inch, and the air changed texture. It wasn't cold or warm, dry or humid, it just was. The entry hall stretched longer than the house should allow. Her flashlight beam landed on a staircase veering sharply upward. No banister, just steps embedded in the wall, each a different height and depth. A single bulb overhead flickered in irregular patterns, casting shadows that refused to stay still. Jules clicked her body cam on. Entry secured. Initial interior reading is inconsistent with known architectural laws. Ambient temperature, 22 degrees Celsius. Time. She paused. Her watch was frozen. She tapped it. No response. She glanced at the floor. The wooden planks were smooth and matte, but her footsteps made no sound. Her boots touched down and her ears registered nothing. She stopped moving and heard a single step behind her. She turned sharply. Nothing. Likely auditory lag, she whispered. But she didn't believe it. She moved forward. The first room to the right appeared to be a study. Bookcases lined the walls, but the spines were blank. The titles, if they had any, shifted and blurred like ink dropped into water. A desk sat in the center, its surface impossibly clean. No dust, no markings, yet the air smelled faintly of burnt paper and rust. She reached for one of the books. Before her fingers made contact, it fell off the shelf by itself, spine cracking as it hit the floor. The pages flapped open, revealing not words, but densely packed symbols, triangles within circles, spirals wrapped in grids. One shape twitched on the page. Jules stepped back. Her breathing was shallow. She was still trying to rationalize. Maybe gas leaks, maybe magnetic interference, maybe the floorboards shifted. She picked up the book with gloved hands and closed it. The moment the cover snapped shut, she heard a low groan from above. From the ceiling, she stared upward. Nothing, but the shadow on the floor no longer matched hers. Impossible angles. By the time she reached the second floor, she had noted 13 architectural anomalies. A hallway that looped back on itself despite only one door. A window that showed stars despite it being noon. A mirror that delayed its reflection by 3 seconds. She also noted a persistent hum beneath the walls, a subharmonic vibration, somewhere around 17 hertz. Infrasound, the fear frequency. Her training reminded her that such frequencies could induce anxiety, nausea, and even hallucinations. But it didn't explain the stairwell that ascended into darkness but descended into light, or why her own voice echoed twice when she whispered, once immediate, and once with a slight distortion, as though repeated by someone trying to remember how she spoke. She paused at the landing, setting down her gear for a moment. Her head was pounding. She needed water. Something felt too thick in the air, like breathing syrup. As she opened her canteen, she noticed movement in the corner of her eye. A painting on the wall. It hadn't been there earlier. It depicted a hallway identical to the one she stood in. Same pattern of cracks on the wall, same moth-eaten rug, same dust motes floating in the stale light. Except in the painting she could see herself standing there. She leaned closer. The painted version of her slowly turned its head to look at her, then smiled. The bedroom. She chose a room to rest, what looked like a guest bedroom. The bed was untouched, covered in pristine white sheets. A vanity stood against one wall, though its mirror was obscured with a black cloth. That made her feel better. She set up her workstation. Scanners, a small laptop, notebooks. She didn't trust electronics here. Signals were warped. She'd lost her uplink 5 minutes after entering the house. Still, she took notes by hand, detailing her findings. Every time she looked up, the angle of the ceiling had changed. She removed the cloth from the vanity mirror. Her reflection stared back, except her eyes were the wrong color. "Stop it," she whispered, and pulled the cloth back down. She opened her notebook and began to sketch the layout of the house, but no matter how she arranged it, the measurements didn't make sense. Rooms overlapped. Some hallways intersected with themselves. When she tried to draw the stairwell, the pencil snapped. A whisper sounded from the hallway. "Jules." Her blood turned to ice. She stood. That voice was hers. The second voice, her voice, had come from the hallway outside the bedroom. Jules remained perfectly still, hand frozen halfway toward her flashlight. Then it spoke again. "Jules, you're not supposed to be here yet." Her stomach flipped. The tone wasn't malicious, but it wasn't neutral either. It was familiar in the way an old wound was familiar, something personal and buried and wrong. She stepped into the hallway, flashlight raised. Empty. The bulb overhead flickered once. On the wall, the painting of the hallway now showed her standing in the corridor she was currently in, staring into an open bedroom door. Her left hand in the painting was lifted. She was waving. Slowly, Jules lifted her real left hand. In the painting, her double didn't follow. It turned and walked away. The basement that shouldn't exist. By the 4th hour, Jules had stopped trying to map the house. Her sketches curled like leaves, their edges growing damp despite no apparent moisture. The measurements refused to align. Her mental checklist of anomalies had passed 50. The whispering grew worse. Now it came from behind closed doors, from air vents, from inside the books. Once, while passing by the kitchen, she heard the oven ticking as if it were cooling down. But when she opened it, the inside was packed with black feathers, slowly turning to ash. She decided to descend into what looked like the basement. There was no basement listed on any blueprint. The door to the stairs hadn't been there before. Now it stood ajar, an oily breeze curling out. The air smelled of ozone and mildew like a storm trapped underground. Her feet touched the first stair. It groaned, not the wood but the house itself, as though recognizing her decision. The descent was longer than it should have been, 47 steps by her count. They ended in a concrete corridor lit by wall sconces filled with black flame. At the end, a door. Smooth. Featureless. It opened when she blinked. Inside was a room filled with mirrors. No walls, just her, reflected 100 times in warped glass, each reflection slightly wrong. One smiled when she didn't. Another had no eyes. One was older, one was taller, one was stitched together with wire. She moved through them. Some followed, some didn't. At the far end of the mirrored chamber was a pedestal. On it, a globe, a perfect sphere of mirrored glass. Hovering, she reached for it. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, the room inverted. Up became down. The mirrors melted into themselves, their frames hissing like steam. The whispers returned, louder now, chanting, a wordless hymn in a language of angles and friction. She ran. The stairs were gone. She clawed through a hallway of hands, arms reaching from walls, skin smooth and cold. They didn't grab her. They only pointed, all of them, to a door at the far end. The door opened before she touched it. She emerged into the bedroom. Not the one she entered through. A different bedroom. Same bed, same mirror. But on the bed lay a body. Her body, the architect's. Jules didn't scream. She backed out slowly, shutting the door with trembling hands. Then she pressed her forehead to the wood and exhaled. Just hallucinations, she whispered. Deep infrasound, isolation, mirror exposure. But her voice shook. Back in the hallway, the lights were different, greener, dimmer. The floor sloped upward, but her body leaned downward. Gravity was subjective here. Time, too. Her watch now counted letters instead of numbers. The mirror at the hallway's end was no longer covered. It shimmered. She approached it and saw not herself, but a tall, robed figure, its face concealed by spirals of ivory bone. Where eyes should have been were windows. Inside each window, stars. The figure raised its hand and pointed downward. The floor beneath her vanished. Descent into the fold. Jules fell, not down but through. Through wood, through thought, through skin and memory. She landed in a room that shouldn't exist. Walls bent like petals. The floor was written with glyphs that glowed beneath her footsteps. In the center of the room was a corner, just a corner, but one that bent space around it. Angles twisted, folding into each other. It was wrong, not just architecturally, ontologically. It whispered, "You are almost ready." Jules turned. The robed figure from the mirror stood behind her. Its mouth was a spiral. From it, geometric sounds dripped like honey. Not words, but impressions. She understood. The architects had built this house as a sieve, a filtration system for minds. Only those capable of perceiving higher dimensional thought could even navigate it. The rest were discarded, driven mad, or erased completely. "You test us," she whispered. "Why?" The architect approached. Its robe trailed behind it, vanishing into dimensions she couldn't name. Its hand reached toward her face. "Because curiosity is a doorway," it said in her voice, "and doors must be guarded." Fracture. When Jules awoke, she was in the study again. Except now the books had titles. Topology of the Spiraling Threshold, Bones of the Unformed Speech, J. Mercer, First Draft of Collapse. She reached for the third book. Her name glowed on the spine. Inside were pages of her handwriting, notes, journal entries, diagrams. The final entry read, "Time reversed today. I saw myself enter the house. I did not wave back. The house is learning me." She dropped the book. On the desk sat a note carved into the wood. "I'm still in here. Don't trust the way out." Her head throbbed. The walls pulsed with each heartbeat. From the hallway, footsteps. Familiar ones. She opened the door. Another her stood there. This Jules was dirty, eyes sunken, skin pale as glass. Her mouth opened. She said, "Run or don't. Either way, we'll meet in the fold." Collapse. Reality fractured. Rooms rearranged as she moved. Doors opened in memories. The hallway now showed her childhood bedroom. She entered it. Her mother sat on the edge of the bed, face turned away. "Don't turn around," Jules whispered. The figure did anyway. It had no face, only a mirrored surface. It reflected Jules as she might have been, old, alone, consumed. The room dissolved. She was back in the corner room, the fold. It pulsed green. Blood dripped from the walls upward. The architect stood before her again, but now it had her face. "Jules Mercer," it said in 100 voices, "you are accepted." Her hands, reached from the corner, pulling her in. She didn't fight. The quiet zone. Jules Mercer no longer remembered what silence used to feel like. The quiet zone was not truly quiet. It was just that sound no longer translated into vibrations through air or bone. Everything here hummed with intention, and that intention wasn't human. She floated, or perhaps walked, her feet no longer obeyed gravity in the traditional sense, through the core chamber of the fold. The architecture now resembled cathedral geometry, as though built from equations instead of stone. Pylons of translucent material twisted upward, vanishing into fog made of colorless motion. Behind her, the corridor she came from collapsed in on itself with a soundless snap, like a book closing. Before her, a dais with 3 thrones, all occupied. They resembled the architect she had seen earlier, but each was distinct. One was built entirely of fractured glass, shimmering with reflections that showed different versions of her, dead, mutated, smiling with too many teeth. Another pulsed with veins of blue-green light, its robe twitching as if filled with whispering worms. The third had no form at all. It was a tear in space, a void that bent thought around it. Jules stepped forward. The beings spoke in perfect unison, their language bypassing ears entirely. "She has walked the angles. She has broken the recursive wall. She has unlearned the filters of human perception." Jules fell to her knees, not from submission, but because the weight of comprehension cracked her spine. She saw it then, the true purpose of the house. It was not a prison, not a test. It was a crossroads, a place where minds were brought to the edge and forced to decide, contain, ascend, or dissolve. Jules saw every failed version of herself, bleeding in stairwells, whispering into mirrors, folded into corners, screaming through teeth that didn't belong to her. She saw one version of herself clawing at the walls until her fingers wore down to bone. Another wept into a sink where her reflection drowned. "You are the first to reach us intact," the architect said, "but you are not whole." She felt the lie of her body slough away. She was never just flesh, never just memory, never just Jules. The garden of bone thought. The architects opened the fold. Behind the dais, the space expanded into a biomechanical garden. Living structures coiled around thought forms, thorns built from language and color, trees whispering songs of dimensionless sorrow. Creatures moved within the garden, bipedal, eyeless, half-recognizable, each one once human, each one transformed by comprehension. The sky above did not hold stars. It held ideas, glowing with shapes never meant to be perceived by linear minds. A guide emerged, a being shaped like Jules, but older, wiser, sharper in angle and impossible in symmetry. "I am what you might become," it said. "Or what I already am," she asked, uncertain if her words were sounds or intentions. The guide turned toward a spiraling staircase made of bone and memory. One path leads to understanding, the other to return. Choose. She hesitated. Return to what? The guide smiled. To less. The return that wasn't, she chose. To return, at least to try. The architects did not protest. Instead, they placed her in the eye room, a sphere of polished void. Inside it, the memory of her physical form reassembled like a crude costume. She wore her body again like wet clothes pulled from a fire. Reality folded inward. She collapsed on the outskirts of the forest, 3 kilometers from the veiled property. Local rescue found her naked, shivering with no injuries and a steady heart rate, but her brainwave patterns were unreadable. They asked her questions. She did not speak for 70 hours. When she did, she said, "They don't build houses, they grow them. It's still inside me. There's no inside anymore." The aftermath. At the Bureau's secured facility, they ran every test imaginable. Her EEG showed a secondary rhythm, one unknown to neuroscience. Her dreams projected electromagnetic patterns through walls. Her reflection lagged behind in a 5-second delay. In one instance, her shadow detached and crawled up a wall. Dr. Jules Mercer was deemed cognitively compromised and placed under observation. But that wasn't the end. Final interview. A week before full neural collapse, a final attempt at communication was authorized. Interview conducted by Dr. Lynn Garreau, specialist in post-anomaly linguistics. Begin transcript. Dr. Garreau. Jules. Can you hear me? Jules. Yes. Dr. Garreau. Do you know where you are? Jules. The echo of the exit, the loop before the fold. Dr. Garreau. I see. Do you remember the house? Jules. I am remembering it now. It remembers me in return. Dr. Garreau. What was it? Jules. A seed. A wound. A mirror angled against our limits. Dr. Garreau. Are the architects gods? Jules. Not gods. Gardeners. Of us. Dr. Garreau. Did they harm you? Jules. No. Dr. Garreau. Then why are you breaking? Jules. Because I am trying to remain one person. Pause. Dr. Garreau. Jules, if you could leave us a message, something to help others, what would you say? Jules leans forward, eyes unfocused. Jules, I'm still in there. Don't trust the way out. End transcript. Final note. The Mercer Paradox. 1 year later, Dr. Garreau submitted a white paper titled The Mercer Paradox: Cognitive Dissonance and Higher Dimensional Contamination. The key conclusions. Dr. Mercer's knowledge of the architects infected linguistic frameworks across 3 translation AIs. 8 staff involved in her care reported memory distortion and recurring dreams involving staircases without tops. The location of the veiled property could no longer be found. On her final day, Jules Mercer disappeared from the Bureau's secure ward. CCTV footage showed her reflection standing still while she walked away. The reflection did not vanish. It blinked, in a pattern resembling Euclidean primes. The end.